Yeah, so I think we have actually given some minutes for us to start the webinar, right? So first, this you're welcome to um Siri Cloud and Tech Abbey. Siri Cloud and Tech Abbey, where we're trying to last webinar we'll discuss on how to start a career in IT, and we discuss a lot of different concepts of actually getting this started, right? And for this second phase, we'll now diverting into a key area in IT, which is called cloud computing, right? So on this cloud computing webinar, we'll be going through the concept of cloud computing, what the concept of cloud computing, uh, the different models of cloud computing, then the benefits and the type of services that are being offered in the cloud. Then also we'll now do a demo on how to create an account using Azure as a case study in terms of a particular cloud providers. But we have different cloud providers in regards to AWS, Azure, GCP, Oracle, and some other keynote providers in the cloud space, right? So on this, we'll be using Azure as a case study, and after the introductory part of the whole training, the whole webinar, then my colleague Abiola will go ahead and perform a demo on how to create an account on Azure and how to create a particular resource on Azure, and using the GUI and also the PowerShell method for that, right? So first of all, let me introduce Abiola. So Abiola, we started the webinar last few weeks back, and this is actually the second phase. Fabiola, say something to our people.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining. So, like Siri mentioned, the major aim of this webinar is to introduce people into Azure and get people up to speed with what Azure is about. Because I'm sure many of us here have been hearing Azure. Some of us are familiar with what it means. Some of us are not, and some of us want to get more information about what Azure is and how they can get into tech. So, in this demo or in this webinar, we'll be having two phases, which the first part is just an introduction into Azure and the various cloud services. Let's say the Kickstarter into getting into Azure. Then the second phase, we're going to try and do a little demo where we use the Azure CLI as well as the Azure portal to create the most common resource used by, for instance, engineers in Azure, which is the virtual machine. So, the virtual machines and infrastructure as a service resource. So, we will be doing that using the portal as well as the Azure CLI in this demo. Then also, um, if you don't have an Azure subscription, it's something you could sign up for. Unfortunately, currently, Nigerian cards aren't fully accepted. But if you don't have an Azure account right now, you could also follow along. We'll be sending documentation, links, and everything you need to follow along with this webinar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Abiola, for that brief introduction and also an insight on what we're going to be doing today. So, what we're going to be doing today, right? So we're starting with cloud computing, and I'm going to be your host for the first session, and after that, Abiola is going to take over the uh, the other session, right? So, cool. So, the first concept we're going to discuss about and what we have to understand is, first of all, understand the ideology behind cloud computing, why we're having cloud computing today, as a major innovative idea that is actually driving the management of infrastructures around the globe, right? So if most of us are very conversant, or if we have a little background of ICT, we understand that previously, before now, before you host your applications, if you want to host your applications locally in your own server, you have to do it within a particular building. You have to buy hardwares, you have to buy different infrastructures, you have to purchase uh, racks, you have to purchase different high level computing, right, to be able to host these applications, right? So we have what we call the on-premises environment, right? And whereby we manage our users and the likes, right? So there was an innovative idea that now came up, whereby this some group of people just understood that, okay, why don't we help people host this particular application, or host this particular infrastructure in a particular location where they can just access their own environment via the internet, than getting this uh, developed or built in their own building, right? Why don't we just go ahead and develop this for them, and you can have access to them via the internet? So that is what actually gave birth to cloud computing. So cloud computing is not saying there's something on the cloud, there is a building. No, there is like the way we were saying the cloud, then we have our infrastructures in the cloud, like what someone asked when we are learning this whole thing, right? They talked about you're saying cloud computing. Do you mean that the infrastructures or the application being hosted is actually in the cloud? So what about if it gets raining? What will happen to those infrastructures? Or if there's lightning or thunderstorm, what will happen to those infrastructures? So then we just laughed about it, right? But most of these questions are what some people have on their head once they get to hear cloud computing, right? They just feel, when you look at the cloud, there is an infrastructure there in the cloud, but it's not like that, right? So these things are still being built and being developed in a particular location, right? So that location is that hosts those infrastructures. You only access those things via the internet, right? So, and you understand that currently in the internet we have the public facing internet, and also being able to access that particular application via a VPN, that's private internet, right? So let me go back to the introductory part of cloud computing. Say cloud computing is a transformative technology that allows individuals and businesses to access and utilize cloud resources, computing resources over the internet, like what I discussed before. So it's just getting a building, host your infrastructures on that building, then you access them via the internet. Then what are the keynote that we're going to cover today? That we'll be covering today. So we're going to cover the key concept of cloud computing, the types of cloud services, the deployment model, the benefits and the challenges of cloud computing. That's what we're going to discuss today. And I bet you in the next 1 hour, 30 minutes or 2 hours, we should be able to round up this whole process and the rest, right? So the next thing we'll be talking about is the different models of cloud computing, right? So the different models of cloud computing, we have the infrastructure as a service, the platform as a service, and the software as a service, right? So I'm going to explain this with a layman term, so you get to understand what this different models is actually uh, is is all about. What this model is all about. So just 1 minute, sorry. So the when it comes to the infrastructure as a service, right? So infrastructure as a service is infrastructure as a service is a model of cloud computing that allows you to host, to take over, get control of your own infrastructures, right? Get control of your own infrastructures and be responsible for for the security of your infrastructure. Sorry. Oh, shit. And be responsible for the security. Okay. So, infrastructure as a code, as a service, right, is a cloud computing model that actually provides you like an on-demand access to cloud resources such as storage, such as servers, networking, virtualization, and the rest of them, right? So when you talk about uh, infrastructure as a service, right? So you're talking about tools like virtual machines, you're talking about tools like storage accounts, you're talking about tools, majorly virtual machines and storage accounts, right? So when you talk about virtual machine is just a replica of your computer in the what hosted in a particular location, right? So if we're talking about virtual machine, just take note that virtual machine is like what I have physically, right? But it's been hosted what in a particular in a particular in a particular location, right? So I just have access to it by using my username and password to be able to access that particular virtual machine, right? So when we talk about storage account, storage is like your hard disks, right? Where you host different kind of datas, different kind of you host datas, you can host files and the rest of them, right? So that is being regarded as also as an infrastructure, right? So now why we did they call them infrastructure as a service? Infrastructure as a service is that you actually own some responsibilities, right? You do on your own, right? So you own some responsibility you do on your own, like what patching of that virtual machine, patching of the virtual machine, the security of the virtual machine, how access is being granted to that particular virtual machine and what is hosted on that particular virtual machine. So you are responsible for those things, right? You're responsible for the type of OS you're using on the virtual machine. You are responsible for the type of storage space you're using on that virtual machine. You're responsible for patching that virtual machine, right? Patching that virtual machine to mitigate any security concern in that virtual machine, right? You're still responsible on the networking aspect of that particular virtual machine, right? So those are the responsibility that comes with infrastructure as a service. So, like what I said before, I said infrastructure as a service is actually a type of cloud computing service that offers essential computing, essential compute, storage, and networking resources that is being used on the go, right? So it's being used on the go. So you manage your virtual machine, you manage your resources yourself, you manage your resources yourself, you manage your OS yourself, right? So what you only have, what Microsoft can only, or where this particular virtual machine is being hosted, is just the kernel aspect of it, right? The kernel aspect of it that is being attributed to that particular cloud resource, that particular cloud providers, right? Particular cloud provider. So when we talk about platform as a service is Microsoft is telling you, or let's just say a cloud provider is telling you, okay, you have your application and you have your code, right? What you just have to do is come with those code and host it in my platform, and don't get worried about where it's being hosted or what particular environment is being hosted. You can actually choose you can actually choose the OS that you want to deploy, but you don't care the machine that is being hosted on. You don't create a machine for yourself. You don't create a virtual machine to be able to host these particular applications on that virtual machine. You don't care about it. You just bring your code, you create your services, and you'll be able to deploy. You deploy those services to that particular, you deploy your application to that particular app services, right? Or function app or logic app and the rest of them, right? So platform as a service, Microsoft owns the platform, right? They're responsible for the platform. They're responsible for patching of those platforms. They're responsible for the security concern of those platforms. They're responsible for for uh they're responsible for scaling that platform you actually deploy your application to. They are responsible for that. So what you're responsible for is just to come, bring your application and post on the platform. So you don't care if the platform that is being you hosted your application on is being is um is being patched, right? You don't care about that's none of your business, right? Or you don't care if you create scaling, uh, 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 you want your application to scale up or scale out, right? Scale up or scale down, right? You want your application to scale up or scale down. You just choose the instances you want it to scale to. So you don't care how many resources is being created. As far as you choose what resources is being, what you want your application to scale to at a particular time or at a particular time, right? Or you want your application to scale to on a particular time, it's Microsoft responsibility that once the application hits that particular rule, it scales to that particular instance. So platform as a service, as simple as it is just come with your platform as a services, come with your application, right? Just come with your application and host it on Microsoft platform, right? Then we have software as a service. Software as a service are those services that are already being developed, right? They're already being developed, and you just pay to use them. So example of software as a service Microsoft Office, right? Microsoft Office, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So those are applications that are already being developed by different bodies, right? So you just pay for you to be able to access them or be able to use them. Remember, if you know very well, we talked about when you use most of us or everybody that have a computer today use Microsoft Word, right? So Microsoft Word is actually a software as a service. It's being developed. You don't know how it was developed. You don't know how the code was written, but you just understand that once you open the Word, you should be able to use it, right? So it just give you the avenue to be able to use those applications, right? And you just subscribe to them. Right. So if you have any question, you can just be dropping the question on the you can be dropping your questions on the
Siri,
chats. Yeah.
yeah, can I chime in a bit?
Okay.
Something I think I just want to add to what you've been explaining is infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. For infrastructure as a service, if you are new to everything within Azure, it may be a bit complicated for you. So let's just break it down. So for infrastructure as a service, it's just like, okay, I have a website. Let's assume my website is femi.com. Now on femi.com, there are different ways I can host femi.com. I can decide, am I going to make sure? So what I mean by host is, for instance, if you go to every website, for instance, facebook.com, instagram.com, everywhere, anytime you type instagram.com, it is sending some messages, or it's communicating over some protocols to let me break it down to let me use sending messages to um a web server. So Instagram.com itself, it has an IP. So for instance, if you go to Instagram.com, that is just the URL. It is sending messages to, for instance, a server, an app service or something, for instance. So in that instance, if I want to host a website called femi.com, there will be different decisions on my mind. Am I going to control the whole website? That is, for instance, I can decide on my computer today, I want to host my website. I would have my database on my infrastructure, the same infrastructure which I am controlling. So the database is, for instance, where all your data is going to as a consumer. Then I would also control networking. I'll control everything. So what does that usually cause in terms of problems for us? So what do you think as a person that will cause in terms of problems for us? If my computer is down, say my MacBook is down, and that's where I'm hosting my web server, nobody will be able to log in because there's no connectivity to that computer. So that brings some points of failure, which you may or may not have anticipated when using infrastructure as a service. So infrastructure as a service, you can compare it to, if some of us are familiar with the olden days terms, the monoliths. So sometimes, most times, we usually host, not all the time, monoliths are hosted on infrastructure as a service, but basically your whole application, you are controlling every aspect or most of the aspects of the infrastructure service, of your application, communication, patching, like Siri mentioned, everything within your application, you're controlling it. So Microsoft has something we call the responsibility model. So within infrastructure as a service, there is a few things that you control, like, which is very, when it comes to software as a service, you control the littlest of things. So for instance, the whole software itself is being run by the software provider. The only thing you need to do is to go in, log in, and make sure that your software is running. So, but with platform as a service, there's a level of encapsulation. So, for instance, if you are using an app service, for instance, within your app service, you don't know where your app service is running. You just know that, okay, oh, you have an app service, your application is running on that app service, and everything is being controlled within Azure. So, patching, you have views as to what is happening, but the underlying infrastructure, you have no control over it. But when it comes to infrastructure as a service, you control basically everything. So when you, for instance, go in an interview and they ask you IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, you just have to have it in mind that SaaS gives you the least level of control, but the maximum level of control to the cloud provider. PaaS is a bit in the middle, while IaaS gives you a full amount of control. So I think that is how you can differentiate between the three. So an example of an IaaS service is a virtual machine, which I'll be demonstrating later within this webinar. A virtual machine is just like, okay, oh, I have my Windows computer and I'm creating an emulation of that Windows computer within the cloud. So for instance, that Windows computer, all I have to do is connect to that Windows computer via the cloud. So the Windows computer itself is hosted maybe in a data center in the US, or wherever it is that data center is. If you're using Microsoft Azure, it may be hosted in South Africa, it may be hosted in the US, anywhere it is. So at that moment in time, the only thing that you control is, okay, oh, you remote desktop, you RDP into the computer, or you find a way to remote into the computer. Everything else is on Azure, but you're controlling the infrastructure itself. But with PaaS is different. The VM itself, or everything, all the underlying infrastructure is controlled by the web provider, while you control the deployment, management, and stuff like that. While with SaaS, you have the least level of control. So each of them has different level of advantages, because for instance, Tech Abbey, for instance, when I was trying to launch Tech Abbey, I'm not a developer, so I didn't bother myself with using a lot of things. I used a hosting platform. So in that instance, depending on what you're using, if you are using a web builder or WordPress or something, that was an example of something that is controlled by the provider. So you are not deploying any virtual machine, you're not doing anything. That all that has been encapsulated. The only thing you need to do is to bring your code, and it is run on that service provider. I'm sure some of us are familiar with WordPress and stuff like that. So things like that, they give you less level of control. But with infrastructure as a service, from A to Z, let's say just a little portion of it is encapsulated from you, but most of it, you are in control. So that's how I myself would try and break down infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. So I guess, Siri, you can continue. That's just what I wanted to add.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Biola, for the little insights. So we're done with the different models of cloud computing. So the next step we're going to So the next thing we're going to talk about is the benefits of cloud computing. So since we'll be discussing about cloud computing, what are even the benefits? What do we stand to gain from using for hosting our resources hosting our applications, for hosting our users in the cloud. So what do we stand to gain? So I think that's most of the question that comes up when you're actually being able, when you're trying to push a particular innovative ideas to people. So the first thing you think about when using cloud computing is cost saving, right? So it helps to actually save costs in running your day-to-day infrastructure or services, right? And when we mean cost savings, we're talking about using like at the beginning of the lecture, I talk about using high compute powers, high computers to actually being able to push or host a particular applications, right? And you can get those resources or those computers at a very large amount, right? And after some time, if you intend to get an application, if you tend to get high traffic in your applications and your particular infrastructure or the one you currently have is not able to host, is not able to cater for that particular traffic, definitely there's going to be an issue or there's going to be a downtime in that particular application, right? So definitely you have to go and buy more compute power to be able to run that particular applications to host to cater for those traffics, right? So Azure or any cloud provider, they're actually coming up with it. So they're telling you, okay, we can actually do this for you for a cheap money. What you have to do is just get your if you're using virtual machine, get your virtual machine created and state the compute power you want to use. And you will not billing you, we're not billing you for those compute power being bought, but we're billing you for the usage of it, right? For the usage of it, right? So if I use they can state that when you use a particular virtual machines for like 1 minute, they'll bill you for $2, right? So it depends on the time that you're running that particular application, that particular virtual
And the
machine that
size of
you've
the
been
machine.
billed. Yes, that you've been billed on. And the billing of the virtual machine depends on the compute power of that particular virtual machine. So if you're using a virtual machine with uh, 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 a high CPU, a high memory,
One
or a
terabyte.
high RAM, 1 terabyte, definitely you're going to pay more for it, right? You can be billed like $20 per day for that for running that particular virtual machine. So it depends on your compute power that you intend. It depends on your compute, you what your it depends on your application you're hosting and the traffic that hits that particular application that you now use to those rules is what you then use to what you analyze those things, and what you analyze your result from there is what you then use to what to develop these infrastructures, right? So in terms of cost saving, Azure is saying any cloud provider is saying we don't want you to just buy these goods, right? Buy the service, right? Buy this compute power. After buying, what you have to do, well, after buying, if you have a higher traffic that has supersedes that compute power you have bought, right? The next thing you're checking is to what? Is to scale up again, right? So you're scaling up again. So as you're scaling up, you're buying new resources and you're adding that to what? To you're buying new resources and you're adding that to your machine, right? But actually saying you don't have to do that. If you experience a high traffic, right? We have a feature that can just allow you to scale out, right? Scale out at that particular time. And once that traffic is actually subsidized, it goes back to the normal size, right? So there are different rules that can actually use to state that. So these things help in saving costs in what in the cloud. So you understand that you don't buy them, you just use them. After using them, after using them at that particular time and you're done, it goes back to normal, right? So than for you to be paying for physical hardwares, physical infrastructures, instead you just pay for the usage of those what of those infrastructures or those services in Azure. So the next thing we're talking about is scalability. Like I've been talking about scalability, and scalability is one particular uh, an important point in our IT world today. how can your application scale from a particular instance to another instance. Like when we were growing up, I know when we were growing up then, most of us that I want to say most of us that went to university, but I think all of us went to university, right? So our school days in the university, right? Sometimes when we were paying for school fees, right, you understand that a particular time the application, this website might just go down. It will not be accessible for a particular time, right? So once it's not accessible for a particular time, that means that particular website was hosted in a particular infrastructures, and that infrastructure could not cater for the amount of traffic that is being hitting that particular applications, right? So once it gets to a particular threshold, what happens? The either the server goes down or the server crashes, right? And once it crashes, you see the IT guys running around trying to restart the server or trying to go and purchase more hardwares and add to trying to purchase more hardwares and add to the existing infrastructure just to cater for that particular traffic, right? So what one of the essence of this cloud computing is what to be able to allow your application scale whenever there's high traffic and whenever there's low traffic. So there's a rule on the on our virtual machines. There's a rule on our app services that you actually use when your application hits high traffic and when your application hits low traffic. So when your application hits high traffic, your application actually scales out, right? It scales to more instance. So when I mean more instance, it creates an instance of itself over time. It creates an instance of itself. Create an instance of itself. Then once the application is back to normal, right? When the application is back to normal, it scales in, right? It scales in. So that means if I have an application and there is high demand, maybe I'm running Black Friday, right? Black Friday on Jumia. And Black Friday, we Nigerians, we like free things, right? We just go to the site. This thing is very cheap. You go and purchase it. This thing is very cheap. So you understand that Black Friday will bring more traffic on that particular site. But if there is no rule or there's no feature on that particular application to be able to scale out when there's high traffic, you understand that those applications will go down once it hits a very high traffic. Those applications will go down. So what they implemented was scalability. Scalability is the tendency of what? Adding more resources. Adding more
Siri,
resources to
hey Siri, sorry for interrupting.
okay,
I just need to say something. I think maybe some due to the level of the people, maybe some may not understand what scalability is and
okay,
terms like that. Maybe we should try and simplify it a bit. So I think scalability, yeah, Siri, just go ahead. So but maybe we should just try and
okay.
simplify it a bit and stop using maybe technical terms so everybody can go along with the class. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. So how will I explain this now? So if I stay in a building, right? And I stay in one room, I'm all by myself, a bachelor, right? And my one room, I have my bed, I have my TV, I have my kitchen. Just very comfortable, right? For myself alone. But at the cost of life, right? At the cost of life, I have to get a girlfriend, right? Then I added the girlfriend. The girlfriend comes to stay with me, or the girlfriend comes to stay with me sometimes, and she goes back to her house. Then along the line, we got married. When we are married, we understand that that particular room, right, will not be enough for us, for both of us. I have to expand, right? So then I can go into taking what a mini flat, a room, and a parlor. I've expanded, right? Then along the line, if I give birth, right, to my first kid, If I give birth to my first kid, I understand that, okay, I need to have another room for that particular kid. I expand more. You understand? I expand more. If I give birth to the second kid and I understand that that particular room is not enough for both of them, I expand more. You understand? So that is the concept of what? Of scalability in cloud computing. Once there is a once it sees a high traffic or a particular traffic coming into the application, so what it does is there's a rule being set, the number of instances it should scale to whenever there is a particular amount of traffic. When I mean traffic, I mean the number of people visiting that particular application at a particular time. You understand? The number of people visiting that application at a particular time, right? Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think
So
Siri,
maybe
can I say
another
something?
example. Yeah, go
Can
ahead.
I say something?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Ochanya. So, I think what Siri is trying to say for scalability for these new joiners coming into the cloud. So, scalability is the ability of a cloud service to automatically increase or decrease resources. So, you can add more resources and you can decrease, right? So, the concept of cloud computing, dwells heavily on scalability. So, once you hear scalability, the first thing that should come into your mind is expanding or reducing. So you can add more computing resources and you can reduce it whenever and whatever time you need it, however you want it. So you can add and you can reduce. So that's scalability in a layman's term.
Yeah. Thank you, Ochi.
Does that make sense?
So yeah, it does. So I think what Ochi and Siri have been trying to say is generally scalability is just simple addition or subtraction. So
Yeah.
for instance, you have one computer, okay, you decide, okay, you want to add an extra computer. So in this, just have it in mind, or you want to remove an extra computer, depending on the amount of people that are coming onto your website. So for instance, if I'm using website as just a layman's example. So for instance, if 100 people are on your website at this moment, the amount of compute power that you would need, for instance, if you were using two CPUs before, if there are 5,000 people coming to the website, you should understand that those two CPUs may not be sufficient at that point in time. So your application would need to scale. So that is where, for instance, a DevOps engineer or a developer or an infrastructure engineer may come in to help scale the application. So I think that's where scalability is. I think that's a layman's definition of scalability. So just addition, subtraction, basically. So addition may come in two ways, either horizontally or vertically. So vertically means, for instance, my computer is two CPU, of my computer is 500 gig RAM. I decide to increase that 500 gig RAM on this same computer to 1000, you get. But if I may also decide that no, I don't want to increase this computer I may decide to add another instance. So that add another 500 gig RAM to another one. So that will make it 1000, but in two different isolations. So I think that's just generally what it means. If you have any further questions regarding scalability, I think Siri will be able to answer. You can post it within the thread. Thank you.
yeah. So thank you. So if you have any questions, please just drop it on the chat, right? So the next thing we're talking about is accessibility and collaboration, right? So we know cloud services allow users to access data, application, and projects from anywhere with an internet connections, right? Making it faster for teams to collaborate in real time. So what we mean by this is I think most of us we have our computers, and what most of us normally do currently is host information in a particular virtual machines in the cloud, right? So when it's being hosted in the cloud, I can access that information on the go, right? As far I am somewhere I have internet, right? So if I have my work tools and I work with, if I have my work application hosted on a virtual machine and I travel to to another state or another state and I'm with my personal laptop, what I just have to do is connect my laptop to the internet and log into that particular virtual machine, right? And once I log into that particular virtual machine, I have all the information I need, right? So you have your services, your application and services and data on the go. Example again is our OneDrive, Google Cloud, Google Photos, right? So you understand that most of us back up our photos on our phone via Google Photos or backup documents via OneDrive or via Google Docs or via Google Drive, right? So these different services are cloud. These different application are cloud services that helps you to what? That help you to save what information and also help you to save data, and you can actually access those information or data on the go. So the next thing is the type of cloud services. So type of cloud services, we have public cloud, we have private cloud, we have hybrid, and we have multi-cloud. So what is a public cloud? So public cloud are services that are provided over the internet by a third-party provider and is shared among multiple customers, right? So example of public cloud is Azure, and we have Azure, we have AWS, and we have GCP, right? Those are the key actors when it comes to cloud services. When those are key actors when it comes to cloud services on cloud computing, right? So public cloud is we all own our parts or our accounts on that particular provider. Example is Azure. Azure, we have different organization making use of Azure. We have different countries, different governmental body making use of Azure, and different user, even individual users, right, having Azure accounts to themselves and being able to use it to learn or being able to use it to host a particular, being able to use it to learn or being able to use it to host a particular a personal application, right? So that's our public cloud. So private cloud is you are being dedicated, you have a dedicated cloud infrastructure to yourself, right, or to your company. Example of this is we have Azure government, we have Azure China, right? So Azure China is just for the China government to access. Azure government is just for the governmental body to access, right? Then private cloud is you being able to build your own cloud services and you just have access to it, right? Your own cloud service and you just have access to it is isolated to just your own company or your own organization, right? So it can be accessed via VPNs or via VPN. You can have access to it via VPN or you can have access, yes, probably via VPNs. So it's not that open to what? To the cloud. So it's not that open to the cloud, right? They will also have the hybrid cloud. Hybrid cloud is a combination of what? The private cloud and the public cloud, right? That so the combination of private cloud and what and the public cloud. So what it actually does is just move being able to host your environment in a particular private cloud, then have or a particular private infrastructures and have a connection from that private infrastructures to the cloud. So those on that private infrastructures can have access to SaaS applications that are hosted in the cloud. Example of this is an on-premise environment. An on-premise environment that will have all your users being hosted in that on-premise environment, and you use a particular tool to sync those users from your on-premise environment to Azure. So once they get to Azure, once they get to Azure, so once they get to Azure, right, the account on Azure can then be used to access or to have access to what to different to have access to what to different SaaS applications, right? SaaS application like OneDrive, SharePoint, Google, OneDrive, SharePoint, Microsoft Form, Microsoft Docs, and so Microsoft Docs, Microsoft Word, Excel, and the rest of them. So those are different SaaS applications that are actually hosted on the Microsoft environment, right? So if you talk about Google, under Google, we have Google Drive, we have Google Photos, we have Google Forms, and we have Google Works and the rest of them, right? So once you once you migrate your, or will I use the word migrate? Once you're using a hybrid cloud, you have a combination of what? A private and a public cloud, right? So the other one is multi-cloud. So when you talk about the uses of multi-cloud provider, it's just to using different cloud providers. So actually um run different instances in your environment, right? So you can have, like, we have worked, most of my colleagues who have worked in an organization that uses both Azure and AWS, right? Azure and AWS. So Azure and AWS, they are different cloud providers, right? But some companies intend to use these two cloud providers to push out applications or to push out application or to host their infrastructures. So why they do this is best known to them, maybe because of costs. Majorly is because of cost, or because or maybe performance optimization, right? So they intend to see, okay, if I use this particular services in Azure, I should be able to get this amount of result, right? But if I use same services in AWS, I should be able to get this amount of result. So they use these two different services to push they use these two different services to push out the application, and just to save money and see which one actually help to optimize a particular areas of the application. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, we're going to look into creating an Azure account, filling in your information, create a subscription. I know this might not be possible today, but creating an Azure account, creating a subscription. Because if you're creating a subscription, you have to use your a particular dollar card to be able to do this. You can use your Nigerian cards to do this. So this might be a blocker for us on this, but I think Bella might have a possible way to go ahead with it. So the demo of creating an Azure account, demo of creating a resource group, creating a virtual machine, and using PowerShell to create a virtual machine is going to be covered by Biola. So Biola, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Siri. So basically, I'm sure everyone has been listening. Some of us may not have been able to go along with everything we've been saying. So I think if we start demoing, for instance, a virtual machine, which we've talked about a lot, that will be able to pull us um, along quicker. So the first thing I'm going to show is um, creating a free account in Azure. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so basically, if you want to create a portal account, you need to, so for the URL I posted in the chat, if you come here, there are the options to try Azure for free. And there's also the option to go for pay as you go. If you have money, you can go for pay as you go, obviously. But Azure offers free credit for new subscribers up to $200. So this $200, you can use it to try anything you want to do within Azure. And I think there are free services that you have for about 12 months. Terms and conditions apply, obviously. Then you have access and basically no upfront commitments. So this is where Azure is actually really good. So if, for instance, if I want to start a business today, rather than thinking about spending millions of naira on a server or, for instance, a data center that I own. I can decide I'll just come to the Azure portal, create an account, and host my services. So, the first thing we are going to do is we would be okay. So we'll be working on the portal itself. Let me show my other screen. Okay, so here is the Azure portal as a whole. So if you go to the URL portal.azure.com, portal.azure.com, this is where you will land after you've signed up. This is the Azure portal. So within the Azure portal, you have various things. It may look a lot at the beginning, but within every Azure subscription, there is one thing you need, which is you need subscription, you need credits, and this subscription is what you'll be able to use to create the resources that we're talking about. So this is my Azure subscription. So within my Azure subscription, I have some certain amount. So when you sign up, you would also have the Azure subscription and the amounts in question. So as best practice, there are things within Azure called resource groups. So when you want to create a resource, basically within your Azure portal, on the right and on the left hand side, there is the create a resource pane. So you can go there and create any resource you want to create. So there are various resources you can create. There's the virtual machine, the web app, you can create a server, you can create a function app. Basically, anything you want to do within the Azure portal, you can do it from the create a resource pane. So for this demo, we want to create this beautiful thing called a virtual machine. So I have on my own hand, I have a virtual machine running. So if you want to create a virtual machine, you can easily just come here and click create. So the best practice generally is when you want to create a virtual machine or you want to create a resource within Azure, you can basically put it in a resource group. Why do we put it in a resource group? So if you are testing and you want to create a resource, the best practice is to put it in a resource group. I don't know, see if you can post resource group within the chat. So the resource group is just basically a container within Azure where everything you deploy within Azure has to be within a resource group. So it's just like, okay, you buy a property and the house example which Siri was given, you put that resource in the house, basically. So if you follow along, let me copy this link. If you already have your Azure subscription, follow along, create a virtual machine, which will take you to this page. So for this, I'm going to create a demo resource group. So you can just click create new. So let's call this demo RG, where RG stands for resource group. So I can click OK. So this demo RG is where the virtual machine which we intend on creating is going to live. Then we can name the virtual machine anything. So if you see this, if you don't know what to do within Azure, you can always click this eye icon. This eye icon will tell you basically. So you can see it says virtual machines in Azure have two distinct names. The virtual machine used as the Azure resource identifier and the guest host name. So when you create a VM in the portal, it's used for the VM as well as the host name. And generally, when you create a virtual machine, you cannot change the name after it's been created. So let's create a virtual machine and let's call it test demo VM. Demo. So that's demo. So this name has to be unique within your subscription. Then this is what we're talking about. So for data centers, you have various data centers, meaning where I want to put this virtual machine. So there's East US, South Central US. So there are various regions where you can put your virtual machine. So these data centers themselves, they are covered here. So if you are quite interested, I posted this link earlier as well. So if you want to see the Azure Global data center location, so you can be able to see what exactly or where your resource is. So this is just like a global overview of everything we have within Azure. So for instance, if I click this is Mexico Central, and if you click Mexico Central, it comes with new availability zones. This data center was open in the year 2024. So if I click Mexico Central, this is where and I decide to create a virtual machine, this is where the virtual machine would be created. There are other places, the central US, there's one within Africa, South Africa as well. So you can decide to put it anywhere you want to put it, basically. So it's your choice. So going back here, we have create a virtual machine. So I'm going to decide to create it, let's say, in the first possible region, East US. Now, so talking about these options, so you may come here and say availability zone. So if you don't if you don't really understand what something is talking about, you can always come to the eye icon and click. So basically, availability zones just offer some bit of resiliency for your application. I don't want to go into too much of complexity, but there are different options that you can use. So there are possible options. You can use the Azure availability zone. So Azure availability zone within that your region. So for instance, if I decide I want to deploy it here in Japan East, there are different availability zones. So this has 3 availability zones. So what this means is that you can decide to put it in different specific locations within your particular region. So let's say I'm using availability zone. Then you have zone options. You can use up to 3 availability zones, 1 per VM. And you can decide to choose the availability zones as well. This is zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. So for this instance, we don't really need that much of resilience for our application. So we'll create it in zone 1, just as an example. So also security type, let's leave it as standard. Then the image, this is what will tell you what you want to create. So over here, you can create different types of virtual machines. You can create a Windows 10 Pro, which all of us are familiar with. You can create an Ubuntu server, Ubuntu 24. So let's decide I want to create a Windows 10 Pro. A Windows 10 Pro is what generally you see on most of our Windows computers. There's also home and different types, but for this, we have Windows 10 Pro. So let me click that. So that is the image I'm using. So basically, I'm creating a virtual machine with a Windows 10 Pro image. Then the ARM architecture, I think we can just leave it as ARM64. So ARM64 is not supported with this VM that I'm creating, so we'll leave it as x64. Then for the size, this is what Siri was talking about. So you can see within the size section, for every VM size, you have different costs. Some are $70 per month. Some are, if you're using the rate that's more than 100,000 per month. Some $53 per month, $140 per month. So there's the option of seeing various sizes. So there are various sizes within Azure. You can configure and check the various sizes you need. So this is what we're talking about. There's RAM, there are disks. So for instance, if you want a 32 gig RAM virtual machine that has a lot of memory, you can use it here within the D series. Then you can also go and see some other series. You can select 16 gig RAM, four vCPUs, that's virtual CPUs. You can see the data disks, local storage. You can also choose if it's going to be a premium disk or the cost. So the cost is what's key. So if you are testing things within Azure, it's always advisable to try and create the least possible amount and always try and delete your resources when you're done. That's why I advise creating this resource in a resource group. So you will see why at the end of this demo. So I'm going to go for this D2S V3, $70 per month. But obviously, I'm not going to use $70 in the whole month because once we are done with this demo, I'm going to delete this virtual machine. So then there's the option for the administrator account. So the ones that have this red asterisk are the ones that you need to fill in. The rest are not necessarily compulsory, depending on your needs. So for username, let me just give it Siri, and the password, anything that you want. Just type something. But it has some password requirements, so you need to satisfy that. Okay, the password match. Okay. Okay, so the passwords finally match. Then the port rules, I think we can leave it as is for this level of class. Then the licensing, let's just click. Then next. So the inbound port rules, for instance, 3389 is just the RDP port. So you need this to be able to RDP into your virtual machine. So, and what I mean by RDP is remote. So remember that we said virtual machines are they are emulations of physical machines on the cloud. So, and if they are emulations of physical machine in the cloud and your machine is in the US, you are going to need a way to access that virtual machine. And that way to access that virtual machine is we're in this method, we're using RDP. There are other methods for a Linux machine. You can use SSH port 22. For RDP, it's port 3389. You don't really need to care much about the port at this point, but the main thing is this is how you get into the virtual machine when we want to log in. Then the next thing, we have the disks. Um, we have premium SSD, standard SSD. So premium SSD, for instance, if I have a production workload, I think premium SSD is the best for this. Then we have standard SSD and your normal HDD. HDD is the typical hard drive which we are used to. So depending on what you want to use, you can decide to pick, but it also involves cost. So let's just leave it at premium SSD. Then we have key management. For now, we don't really need to go into key management and all that. So we have ultra disk compatibility for now as well. I don't think we need to go to reduce the complexity. Then for networking, we would need to create a virtual network, and we have the virtual network. So we already have test demo VNet, so I think we can leave it as that. Then for your subnets, it's going to be the same thing. So I don't know if anyone here is familiar with networking, but this is just a typical subnet that you have within your normal networking environment. So you also have that within Azure. If you're a beginner, I think you don't need to take a look at this point. So another thing we need is public IP. Let's just think, should we create a new public IP static? So I'm going to create a new static IP called demo IP. I just want to create a new static IP so for public access. Then we can allow selected ports, can RDP into the machine. RDP is just basically remoting into the machine. Then if you need, for instance, another port on your virtual machine that you need access into, you can also allow that port from your virtual network. Then there's accelerated networking. To be honest, all this for a beginner, I think we can still leave as is, but public inbound ports, you can also select your inbound ports. You can delete the public IP when the VM is deleted. So let's just leave that for that. But generally, the public IP I'm creating is within the resource group. So at the end of this demo, I'm going to delete the resource group. So I think we can leave that. Then next, management. I think for management, for everything, you can leave as is for now. So there's something here which helps conserve finances when creating a virtual machine, which is auto shutdown. So for instance, if you have an organization where everybody closes at 7 p.m., you can set auto shutdown time to 7 p.m. And this will shut down your virtual machine at 7 p.m. So one thing also is your virtual machines, when your virtual machines are shut down, you are not charged for the running of that virtual machine. You may be charged for your disks if you have a public IP, but your costs then reduce when your virtual machine is shut down. And that's also important because you want to save money. That's one of the advantages of using the cloud. You can be able to control your resource. So in my normal computer, whether I'm using the computer or I'm not using the computer, the computer is always available. So I'm paying for that computer's usage. But within the portal or within the cloud or any cloud base, you can be able to pay for only what you use, which is key. And that's why most organizations are using the cloud. So you see some organizations even reduce what they are doing to the extent where they use functions. So functions that run only when you need them, basically. So they don't pay when those functions are not running. Then the next one is for monitoring. We don't really need any advanced monitoring. Um, I think we can leave as is. If you're following along, you just need to leave as is. Then for tags, they are at this point, I don't think we really need them, but generally they are just used to, you can use them to categorize your resources. Or so for instance, you can filter, okay, these resources are in dev environment. So you just have it as dev, then you put the value. So for instance, if you are looking for a resource, you can filter by those tags and get what you need exactly. So the next thing is to review and create our first virtual machine within Azure. So it's giving us the cost. The cost is 0.096 USD per hour. So you already have an idea of how much you're going to be consuming per hour, which is also important because you also, of course, we are in a tough era, so we want to also save. And within our free trial, we only have a limited amount of credits. We have $200. So, and that's $200. If you create a virtual machine that is $150 and you don't put it off, by the end of the day, at the end of 1 month, you may not be able to learn some other resources. So, it's one of the things you need to consider. So, let's just go ahead and create. So, if we go ahead and create this virtual machine, you can see it's deploying. So in a production environment, or if you are going into tech, generally this is usually how you create VMs for maybe test purposes, or you just quickly want to see something, or maybe just a jump box for somebody or something like that. But generally, when you are deploying virtual machines or you are deploying infrastructure in cloud, the preferred way is to do it using infrastructure as code. So infrastructure as code, for instance, things like Terraform. So infrastructure as code, basically, this same virtual machine, for instance, I may be able to deploy, if I want to deploy 100 instances of this virtual machine, the problem then comes in, would I come to the Azure portal and start pressing Azure portal deployment 100 times? That will probably take all day. But if you are using, for instance, Terraform, or what you are seeing here, ARM templates, or any other method of deployment using infrastructure as code. Infrastructure as code simply is all your infrastructure rather than doing them this abracadabra that we did on the portal. We just deploy them using an infrastructure as code tool, for instance, Terraform, your Bicep. Those are infrastructure as code tools. So depending on your level currently, it may be strange or not. So that is where things like Terraform, ARM templates come in. So they are infrastructure as code tools. Then there's another level called configuration management. So in configuration management, you maybe use things like Ansible. So within Ansible, this virtual machine that we are creating, we can be able to do anything within the virtual machine. So for instance, I can decide I will just go into the virtual machine, make some changes to networking, make some changes to some folders, etc., anything I want to do within that virtual machine and to fly with Ansible. Terraform can also do some bits of changes, but it's not as straightforward as a full configuration management tool like Ansible. So while we are waiting for our VM to deploy, sometimes it takes a few minutes depending on availability, size, and so many other factors. So this is the last thing that is left. I think that's been created. Still in progress, still should be in progress. So in the meantime, you can still look at our map. So you can view the map. This is where we have the various data centers within Azure. So all these icons stand for different things. So this is South Africa North. So there's a data center within South Africa in Johannesburg, which was opened in 2019. And it has 3 availability zones. So availability zones within the region itself. So it just helps with, let's just say, availability in this colloquial term, to use it as a colloquial term. Then we also have Brazil South, we have some others. So you can just easily go there and maybe feed your eyes and see exactly these resources I'm deploying. Where are they? Where are they deployed? Do I need to know this So one of the advantages, for instance, of deploying things is closer to you is if, for instance, I deploy a resource in so a data center that is close to me, the latency is reduced. So what we mean by latency? So for instance, if I do a ping, the time to get from point A to point B is reduced. And that is very, very important for somebody that is hosting an application, a website, or some level of infrastructure. So that is important. So generally, most times, due to the fact that, for instance, we don't have any data center in Nigeria, most times you may decide to deploy it within in South Africa or US. I was discussing with a colleague of mine recently, and we're talking about if we should deploy in the US or if we should deploy in South Africa based on we're in Nigeria. So those are the things you consider. So all these data centers, you have to also plan where you want to deploy your resources. There are also GDPR things. So for instance, if you are working within the US now, like Siri mentioned, there's Azure government. If you are doing something critical, you wouldn't want that resource to be hosted in a data center outside of that region. So if I'm doing something within the US, I won't want my data center to be hosted, for instance, in China's Azure government. Why? Because while Azure, there is like a commitment that nothing can happen to your data and there's no access from any third party, you as a company still have your own policies that you want to follow or abide by. And when doing this, you want your data center to be as close to you as possible or within the laws and the guidelines of your company, basically. So let's check on our virtual machine. So our virtual machine is deployed here. So when your virtual machine is deployed, you see that it gives you some things which you may find strange, but it tells you about your virtual machine. So it's telling me my virtual machine is deployed in East US. There's a network interface test demo. We have accelerated networking. There's a subnet name. We have IP addresses. It has a static public IP. So you can see an overview of everything within your virtual machine. Now, if you go to overview, you can see your deployment details. Then you can go to the resource or create another VM using the same template you used to create the first VM. So let me go to our test demo virtual machine. So this is our first virtual machine which we've created in the portal. So within this first virtual machine we've created, you can see the name of the resource group. The resource group, if you remember earlier, I mentioned is a container for deployment within Azure. So every resource within Azure must be put in a resource group. So I think that's important. Then we can see that this VM is running at this point. So you can stop the VM. So if I don't want to use this VM, I can stop the VM. I can restart the VM and I can also connect to the VM. So if you want to connect to the VM, there are various methods of connecting to the VM. You can connect via the admin username. So you're going to connect via the admin username. They are also going to connect. You can, so if you're on a Windows machine, I would just recommend you download this file here, the native RDP file. So once you just click it, you download it, and you'll be able to, once you click that link, you just input your name and your password, and you'll be able to access your VM. But on a MacBook, it's a bit different. So on a MacBook, you use remote desktop. So there is a remote desktop application which I use to launch virtual machines. So these are my virtual machines on my remote desktop application. This remote, I have two virtual machines. You can see the IPs. So for instance, if I want to launch this virtual machine, all I need to do is go there, find the virtual machine name and the password, then input it. So switch tab. Okay. So let us go to this test. Then we copy this virtual machine IP. Rather than, let me go to a new virtual machine. So you can add the IP of the virtual machine. Then you just add. So this is our new virtual machines that have been added to the two existing virtual machines that we have. So if you want to connect to this virtual machine, what do we need? We need the username and password. If you remember, when I was creating the virtual machine, I put in a username and password. And the username in this instance is Siri. So let's copy Siri. Then let me minimize this. So the username is Siri. Then I'll input the password. You're going to input the password that you yourself created. So let me input the password. So this is important to know that this is, so I'm going to connect to this IP. So you can see it's creating a new virtual machine called Siri. So from what you can see, basically, you can see that this is just a new computer that is being created that can be run on my computer. So I can have as many as 500 virtual machines, and I can be able to log into them and be able to do various things. So this Siri, I'm launching it for the first time. So it's going to still giving you the welcome. So it's just like as if I'm launching a fresh computer. So this fresh computer does not have anything on it, so I can be able to change. So you can see for the first time I'm launching it, can just accept. So it's just like setting up a new computer. If you bought a new computer recently, so you can see this is a fresh computer which I just launched, and this is a virtual machine. So what do we want to do within the virtual machine? You can do anything. I can decide to go to Microsoft Edge within my virtual machine. And one thing about virtual machines is we have very fast speeds, basically, compared to, so I'm not going to sync any data. Sorry, start without your data. Okay, so since it's a new machine, there are many things. So you can just do, if you do a speed test, so this is the virtual machine. You see, so the IP that is being used is a Microsoft Azure IP, and it's hosted within the US. But I'm in Nigeria, so I can easily connect. I can check. So if you want to check the speed, you can easily check. So they are usually very fast VMs because they are hosted by Azure. So then you have every. Can I mine Bitcoin? Yes, you can, but if you mine it, they will block your account. So yes, you can. Yes, you can mine Bitcoin in the virtual machine, but if they block your accounts, that's on you. So it's not recommended. It's not recommended, but yes, you can. So now that we have our virtual machine, we have an emulation of the computer, and we can do anything we want to do with this computer. If you have some things that you want to do that you basically don't want to do on your normal computer, you can come here and do it. So this is our first virtual machine, and I think if you have followed to this stage, if you have any questions, please you can let me know. Okay, no questions. Thank you. Then another thing that we can do, let's check. So this is the auto shutdown, which I recommend if you have a VM. So basically, as an IT person, one of the things you need to learn as an IT admin, a DevOps engineer, or anything you're going to do is you have to check how you can maximize the usage of resources. So for instance, if this virtual machine is a jump box or something that is just used to log into something, and people only use it from Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. or whenever it is, you wouldn't want that virtual machine to be running all through the night. So I can decide, okay, I want this VM to, let's assume it's 4 p.m. I want this VM to shut down at 4 p.m. And anytime before it shuts down, or to send me a notification to my email at bella.kayode.com, at gmail.com, then I'll be able to automatically shut down this VM at that specific time. There are other things you can know. There are other ways of connecting. You can also use Bastion. So depending on your level of experience at this point, you can decide to deploy Bastion and connect depending on what you want to do. But if you have a Windows computer, you can always use RDP because Bastion also has costs. Then you can see the disks that are assigned to your VM. You can see the size 127, max throughput is 100. You can see the operating system as well. So the operating system is Windows. So everything you want to see, you can be able to see as well within the test demo VM pin. So sometimes if you go to interviews, which is also key, because one important thing we have to always realize is while we are also learning, we also have to plan for the future, how we'll be able to demo these things, how we'll be able to answer questions. So within interviews, they always ask what type of disk is there, an LRS, GRS. So these are the kind of things that you need to be learning. You need to, for instance, this virtual machine, they can ask you about load balancers. Load balancers are typically layer 4 if you're familiar with networking. So what layer 4 is, basically it is load balancing, and the load balancer doesn't know anything when it comes to routing, or if, for instance, if you are using a layer 4 load balancer within Kubernetes. Kubernetes is another resource within Azure. So you can go to Azure and also decide to deploy a Kubernetes cluster. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Kubernetes. You can decide to deploy Kubernetes. So within Kubernetes, you can decide as well. Most companies these days are going on the Kubernetes drive. So most companies are deploying their applications to Kubernetes because it's scalable. You can deploy your applications, destroy, scale easily. So people use Kubernetes a lot. I think in another demo, we can also deploy a Kubernetes cluster. I'll show you ports and all, but you can deploy Kubernetes. There are several things you can deploy. So for platform as a service, which Siri mentioned, you also have app service. Um, App services. So this is a function as a service. So if you deploy an app service, you can easily just host your web application within an app service rather than deploying a virtual machine. That's an example of a platform as a service. So for a software as a service, an example is your Gmail. Your Gmail is a software as a service. The software is hosted and it's just used as a service. That's an example of a software as a service. If you go to the Azure Marketplace, you'll be able to see a lot of things within the Azure Marketplace. So, and if you come to this left pane, you have your dashboard. You can be able to create a dashboard. For instance, if you don't like how your Azure looks like, you can create different things that you want to be on the home pane when you come within Azure. So those are little things, that tips that you can use to make your work life easier when working with Azure. Then the next step we're going to take, we have deployed a virtual machine from the portal. That's a bit straightforward. It's just by clicking. Now, let us also deploy a virtual machine using the Azure CLI. So for this, I'm going to, let me go into this VM. So I have another VM called Abiola where I already have everything set up. So this VM is called Abiola. So if I want to connect, I can easily go to the connect section because I've forgotten the username. And the name is Abiola. I just kept it as Abiola to make it easier. Go here, put the Abiola guy, then the password. So log into this VM. Thank you. So the first thing, if you want to deploy a VM, we have to take note of the fact that there are several ways of deploying virtual machines. You can deploy virtual machines from the CLI. You can deploy virtual machines from the Azure portal. You can deploy virtual machines with Bicep, with Terraform, depending on the method you want to use. So I should post this documentation in the chat. I think I already did, but yeah. So there are various ways to create a virtual machine. There's the CLI. So this is the portal, which we've already done. So sign into the Azure, the various steps which we went through to create a virtual machine using the portal. Then to connect, you can also use this. Then you can install a web server and various things. Then there's the CLI method, so which is what I want to demo now. So Azure, if you go to your computer, there are different things. There's PowerShell. I don't know if any of you are familiar with PowerShell, but within your PowerShell, you can be able to run various commands to make things easier. So I'm sure sometimes when people see commands, they get scared and all. But running things on commands tends to be a bit easier than when you run it within the portal. Of course, you can be able to replicate what you want to do. So when you want to work with the Azure CLI, the first thing you have to have in mind is you're going to log in. So the command to log in is login. So if you go to Azure login, you can see it automatically popped up, and you can see my email address, and it's a Microsoft account. So continue. So you can see it's retrieving the tenants and subscriptions. So for the quick start, we have basically create a resource group. So I mentioned we already have a resource group. So, but you can also use this to create a resource group. This is the AZ group create command. So we're just going to use this demo. Let me create a notepad to have a list of our commands. So let's copy this. So that same resource group which you created on the portal, let's use a different resource group so we can be able to demo creating a resource group. So this first thing is called a variable. So this is a variable. What is a variable? So a variable in a variable basically is just like um this is resource group. This is my resource group CLI. Now I want to create a resource group named my resource group CLI. But this my resource group CLI, the name can be changed several times. I can decide to change to Abiola or whatever it is. But this resource group variable is always going to be the same. This is the only thing that will change. So I can change it to any name I want, but this is the value I'll be using. Then this is how we use a variable within this. So let me change this to resource group name demo rg2. Demo rg2. Sorry. Resource group 2. Now this is our variable demo resource group 2. And the location is West US3. So let's just change it to East US2. Now let us go. The first thing we want to do is we want to write the name. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is we want to put in the name of our variable. MacBook to Windows VM. Okay, so demo rg2. So we're going to name this variable rg, and we're going to name the resource group demo rg2. Sorry. Cloud Shell. Sorry, okay. I'm doing it in PowerShell. Sorry. Okay, that's the command for bash, but we are doing it in PowerShell. So should I just use the Azure CLI? Let me use the Azure CLI for this demo. Okay. So within the portal, we also have something called the Azure CLI. Let me use that for this demo since I want to demo the Azure CLI. So the Azure CLI is just basically another command line interface. So you can use this within Azure itself. So while that is booting up, so it's requesting a terminal. So when it's requesting a terminal, it's going to So yeah, I can run CLI commands easily. Now, like I said earlier, we want to create the resource group. So let's just put the variable. So the variable name is resource group and the name is my resource group CLI. I'm just using the basic. Then we want the location to be West US 3. Location West US 3. Now, the command to create a resource group is AZ group. AZ group. So we are using this. This is within the chat as well. This is the command I'll be running. This command is basically for us to be able to create a resource group within Azure. So this is the command. So the resource group is my resource group. I just say like, okay, we've already run that command, so we don't need to run that again. Let me just backspace. The command is AZ group create name resource group. So you will notice that the name resource group is just using that variable on the top. So we don't need to be writing my resource group CLI, my resource group CLI, my resource group CLI. So Azure resource group Azure group creates name, resource group, location. So the location is using a variable called a variable named West US 3. So for most of our time, so what this is going to do is, so it has created, you can see how fast it was. It just created a resource because it's just a resource group. A resource group is very straightforward. So now let's go and check if it actually created what we wanted it to be. So what was the name of our variable? So let's go let's search for resource groups. So there's a pane on top where you can search for anything you need. So then the name of our resource group was what? My resource group CLI. So this is what we just created now. And we created it with the Azure CLI. We didn't need to come to the portal to create that. And so that's a bit, it's very straightforward. I think it's very straightforward. So it's very easy to grab that. Then the next thing we are going to do is to create a virtual machine. So for a virtual machine, it has various resources. So we are not going to obviously write all the possible resources. Sorry. Let me minimize this. And then create a text editor. So for this text editor, in this text editor, we are going to, this is a bit. Okay, so the VM name is my VM. The username, let's change the username once more to Abiola 1. Then the VM name, my VM, let's change it to demo VM2. So then the next thing is we want to run this command, azvm create. Azvm create is a command within the Azure CLI. So from the name, I think you can tell azvm create. So this is Azure VM create. So az is the CLI command. So we have azvm create. Then the resource group is going to use the same variable which we named on top called resource group. So what is that variable? That variable is my resource group CLI. So that's where it's going to create this. Let me split this to the left. Yeah, this to the right. I don't know if it's visible this way. Okay. So resource group name. Then we have our name, which is the VM name, which already have in the variable. Then the image is going to be a Windows 2020. So we're just using what we have in the example, Azure Edition Core. Then we're going to specify a public IP address, IP SKU, and the SKU is going to be standard. Then we have an admin user. The admin user is going to be using the username variable, which we've defined called Abiola1. So the first thing we can run the command as a whole, but I think we should just copy and paste this way. So let me paste this. So the name of the demo VM1, This is in the chat as well. So AZVM create resource group. Let's populate the username variable as well. So the username variable has been created. Then the next thing is AZVM creates the resource group, the name. That's the command I pasted in the chat. So I will copy that basically, then paste. Now let me expand this. I almost lost my window. Then we have AZVM create resource group VNN. So let us run that command. When you run that command, so we didn't specify an admin password, so let us specify that. That should have been one of the variables. That password may not be sufficient. This admin password as well, you could pass it in as another variable as well. So generally, in terms of passwords, you always want to have them saved within your key vault or within somewhere safe, basically. So key vault is another resource within Azure. So key vault is just like, I don't know if you have worked with Google passwords. So when you save passwords, they usually get saved in your Google account and stuff like that. So with key vault, you have something similar. And you can be able to save your credentials within Azure in a very secure manner, because there's a lot of hacking attempts and various attempts generally when it comes to companies' data. And we don't want to be responsible for that. So generally, we try as much as possible to be able to decouple our passwords from our deployments. In fact, if you are working with GitHub, so GitHub is another tool that we use. GitHub.com. I don't know if it's familiar with GitHub as well. So there's github.com. So github.com agenda. So this is GitHub, where a lot of you basically every code that you more or less work with, you can have it on GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. So as if you're a developer, you'll be familiar with GitHub as well. So this is generally where we can. So let me just open one. Don't know why I have this, but let's see what's here. So this is something probably I worked on 3 years ago. Then we have the generally as good practice, always nice to have a README. So this is not good practice. So within GitHub, you have your code, you can be able to save different things. I think this is a Kubernetes deployment. Anyways, so okay, this is the Helm deployment of Kubernetes. So we have our deployment service. So the content here doesn't really matter, but this is generally a Kubernetes deployment where I deploy a service, a deployment, and all. But within this, the point is, as I've posted this to the cloud, which is GitHub in this instance, anybody can be able to come to this repo and be able to check what I've done. Or if I'm working within a team, it's easy to collaborate. It's easier than, for instance, I want to make a change. I have to go to Siri's computer. Siri, give me your computer. Let me make a change there. So GitHub really helps when it comes to that, if you're familiar with github.com. And the URL for GitHub is github.com. So our VM in the background has created. Then we can see it has a public IP address, a private IP address. We can see the power states that the VM is running. Then the name of the VM is demo VM2, no zones, resource group. So you can see how easy it was to create it with the Azure CLI rather than going through that whole process within the portal. So with this, you can be able to, for instance, put this command within your pipeline and be able to deploy as many VMs as possible. So everything that I've deployed so far with this resource group here, like I'll find it in this resource group. So this is what it deployed for me. It deployed a disk. This is the virtual machine demo VM2. It deployed a network security group. It deployed a public IP address. It deployed a NIC, that's a network interface, and a VNet. All these don't really matter, but in the long term, they may matter. But for now, while you are still taking your learning journey, you may just know that, okay, well, basically, if I have a virtual machine, my virtual machine will need a hard disk now. That hard disk is disk. Network security group is generally a security group. So it's a way of protecting connectivity to your VM. So it restricts, so not anybody will be able to enter your VM at any point. Then public IP address. The public IP address is basically the IP of your website or whatever, or your virtual machine in this instance. So what we mean by this is generally you want every URL that you have has an IP. That's an IP. So, and what I mean by this, so for instance, there's this command called nslookup. nslookup will show you the IP of, you can be able to see the details of any URL you go to. So I did nslookup google.com. So it's giving me an IP address 168, blah, blah, blah. So I know Google changes their IPs a lot. But so if I click this guy, let's see what it takes us to. So we would have the authoritative server, we'll see the IP at the back end, then we can see the address. So generally, this is what happens. So I can ping as well. Ping is just generally to send a command to, so okay, ping is giving us a, I can't pay google.com on this. So I'm not getting a response. I don't know if there is any, let me do it on my local machine. Google.com. So when you ping, so you can see this URL, for instance, you can go to this URL. That URL is most likely going to be the IP that we have for Google today. You can see that when I typed in that, I don't know, it was quite fast. When I typed in that IP, it resolved to google.com. So this IP 142.250.184.14, it's resolving to google.com. So you can do the same thing for any website. Just if you are just curious and you want to learn, you can be able to go to any website, do maybe an NS lookup or a ping, and get the IP address and see, okay, oh, okay, this is using this IP. So that is a way to improve within your learning journey as well. I have 1 minute, I mean, not waste much more time. Then basically, so since we have this, so you can also apply this to this. So this, for this IP address, 4.242.216 is the public IP of our own virtual machine. So you can be able to access this virtual machine at any point using this public IP. I think we've come to the end of this short demo regarding Azure, the portal, and an introduction to Azure generally. So I don't know if we have any questions regarding what we've done so far.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Abiola, for that short demo. So if you have any questions, so we still have 10 minutes to answer much questions if you have any, right? So regarding this, I think what we just did now, we went through if you have any question, drop the question on the chat, right? So I just want to pass some information. So what we just did now, we went through the concept of cloud computing, right? The different types of cloud computing, the different models of cloud computing, and the different cloud services, right? And we did a brief demo on how to deploy a virtual machine and other resources on using Azure as a case study, right? So after this, while we're doing this is just to give you guys a knowledge, right, of how the concept of cloud computing and how to create a particular resource of cloud computing, right? I know most of us might be saying some terms within that were used was too technical for us, or too yeah, too technical for us. I understand, right? I understand this. Um I understand this feedback, right? To make things more simpler the next time. So if really you want to venture into this journey, into cloud computing journey, and you want to start a career, right? So while we're doing this, we're just introducing these different areas, right, on the tech space. Like today, we've done cloud computing. Tomorrow, we might do something on cybersecurity. Next tomorrow, we might do something on programming or software development or project management, right? Or project management. So we'll just cut across these demos and these webinars to those different areas, right? So on cloud computing, we've done is a 900. Sorry, we have done a little bit concept of what cloud computing is all about and how to create resources on the cloud, right? So the next, how to create resources on the cloud. So if you see this as if you see this topic or this area of tech interesting to you and you want to do more, you want to learn more on this, right? You can reach us on we have a training that will be starting up soon. A training that will be starting up soon. So I just dropped the 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 link, the website on the chat, so you can reach out. Visit the website and get more information about how to start a career in this cloud computing, right? And how to start a career in cloud computing and see where to start from. And we'll take you from the very first beginning down to where you become an expert in this area, right? So I also died. I don't know if we have any questions to ask. If there is no other question, please follow us on visit. Okay, sorry, yeah, follow us on IG and on LinkedIn, so you can get more insight. IG, follow us on IG, Siri Cloud Siri Cloud then Tech Abby on IG, then so that you can get more information on this our next training on our next training on our next webinar, right? So in the absence of no questions, I want to thank you all for joining, and like what I said, follow us on those social media platforms so you can get more information on our next class, right? We can get more information on our next webinar that we'll be doing. So without no questions, I'll say I'll call this a day, and I wish you the best in the rest of your day. So have a great day, and goodbye.
Cheers, guys. Bye.